And tonight, ladies and gentlemen, you may be wondering why I'm wearing this British police helmet. Well, I'm wearing it because we're going to be speaking about a very intriguing case that happened in London, that began in London, a little suburb called Southend-on-Sea, where a werewolf of London was found. Ed and Lorraine Warren will investigate this and we'll talk to you about it. We have a film of an actual interview with a werewolf from Ed and Lorraine Warren's house. So maybe I should take this hat off, even though I like it. I think I'll maybe keep it. And we'll talk to Ed and Lorraine Warren about this intriguing case. So I'd like to start out with Ed, if I could, first. Ed, can you tell us about this actual case of lycanthropy?
Well, this is the first case of a werewolf, or lycanthropy, which is a scientific name for it, that we ever came across in 45 years of investigations. Lorraine and I were at a friend's home, and we were speaking and talking, fooling around. All of a sudden, my attention was drawn to the fact that there was another werewolf in London picture on. Mm-hmm. I thought, my God, they made another one? But this was different. It was on sightings, and I looked at it, and I was watching these police officers, real London police officers, talking about being attacked by a real werewolf. And I looked at Lorraine and I said, what do you think about this? And so as we watched, we realized that this man was the first case of lycanthropy that we ever had come across. So we took it so seriously that we flew to California. We talked with the producers of the show. They told us, yes, that Bill Ramsey was considered a real-life werewolf. And so then we flew to England, and we talked with Bill Ramsey, and I talked and interviewed the police officers who were actually attacked by this man. Now, he stands about 5'7", he weighs maybe 150 pounds, but he would take some of these bobbies, who were well over 6 foot, over 200 pounds, he'd throw them around like they were kindling wood. And the stories that they told us about this man were incredible. How he would ask to be locked up in a jail cell for his protection and the protection of the public. Now, the people out there listening to us right now are probably saying, come on, what are you talking about, a werewolf? Well, I think by the end of this program, they'll realize that Bill Ramsey was a real-life werewolf. But it was Lorraine, really, that talked me into going into London.
That's, I understand that Lorraine was instrumental in getting both of you involved in this case. Lorraine, can you tell us what happened?
For someone, Tony, that was never interested in things like ghouls and werewolves and vampirism, those things never really interested me. Things like ghosts and haunted homes, yes, I was more open to the fact where human spirits were concerned and the fact that homes could be haunted in such a manner. But there was something in the interview that day as we watched that television show in a friend's home after dinner that I looked at that man and knew that that was very sincere, that something was very real, and something inside of me, Tony, told me that I could help him. Now, how I could help him, I really didn't know. But I carried it, according to family and friends, Tony, I carried it to extreme. We went to California, and to get the information regarding the exact production company that produced that particular series on that werewolf was very, very, very difficult.
Well, I understand you went through a lot of different exercises to get to that point, to know even where that film was produced.
Exactly, and then I purchased it for a good sum of money. And that really angered Ed, that I paid that much money for a video of that interview.
I understand also that Ed really wasn't too keen on the idea.
No, I told her, and I said, you know, even if we find out that this man really is a werewolf, I'm not going to go before the public and start talking about a werewolf. Ghosts and haunted houses and demons and devils are bad enough. But now a werewolf, and in London, you know, who would believe it?
Really?
But it actually occurred.
See, when we got back home, when we got back to Connecticut from California, Tony, I must have played that tape so many times, and I tried to listen to every little thing, but the most important thing were the patches that the men wore. Because
that was the tip-off.
That was the tip-off that helped me to be able to know. There are 52 precincts in southern London. And in the middle of the night, while we were in London, we flew over to London for that reason. In the middle of the night, which was the quietest time on the highways and roads over there, I went to precinct after precinct.
I have to interrupt you at this point. It was a full moon that night. We were with Dr. Tony Giangrasso, who's the medical examiner for Fairfield County, and his wife, Betty. And I'll never forget it. A full moon, we're in London, and she's going into these police stations, little places, asking about a werewolf. We were laughing our heads off. And she walked into this first one, and next door was a pub. Guess what the name of it was? The Wolf Pub.
Wow.
And I said, they're going to take her away for sure.
No, I didn't really ask them about a werewolf. I said, I understand you had a case of lycanthropy in the area of southern London.
How many cops would know what lycanthropy is?
I know, really.
But they would say, they were always very, very nice. They were reserved and they were nice to me. And they would say things like, we don't know anything about your case of lycanthropy, but you sure made our night.
Can you imagine walking into an American police station and saying, I'd like to know about your werewolf in this area?
But it was the following morning, Tony, after, kind of an exhausting night, that we checked out of our hotel, and we were waiting for a flight to come in with some other researchers who were joining us. And the flight was going to be late. It was a Pan Am flight. It was going to be late. And so I went back in the hotel lobby, and all of the phone numbers that I was able to get from all of these police precincts that I went to, I started calling numbers. I got a fistful of change, and I started using the phone. And finally, out of all of the numbers, I called this one number, and I said to the party on the other end, I find it very difficult to believe that something as outstanding as this, and I know it took place, happened in this area, but no police are able to help me. Now, why I directed it in that manner on that one phone call, I really don't have the answer. But he said, just let me switch your call. And the next voice I heard was, this is Detective Sergeant Peter Hamilton. And I said to him, well, boy, we're off to a right start. You have the same last name as my mom's maiden name. Now, of course, that's difficult to do with the British, to be quite that bold and forward.
Very reserved.
And jovial about it. Yeah.
Yes, and
did it work? Did it break your
so
ice?
he said to me, you're looking for our werewolf? Tony, you don't know what I felt at that point. All of that work, suddenly it was just so rewarding just to know we reached a point where we could get to the source. And so he said, his name is Bill Ramsey. He said, he's a man who lives in town, respected guy, nice wife.
What's he do for a living, Bill Ramsey?
He's a joiner, which is like a carpenter here. He was working at that time, at the time we met him, he was working on the Dartford Tunnel, which is part of the London Orbital. And so I'm talking to him for quite a while, and I said to him, Detective Sergeant, I'd love to come and meet you. And he said to me, where are you? I says, I'm in London. He said, I'm in Southend-on-Sea, which is a distance from you. But he said, I really couldn't talk with you until I got permission from my governor. And I said, but you are talking to me.
Right.
And he said, that's what I love, is assertive American women. So he said, give me the phone number where you're going to be staying. And so I said to him, well, when we leave London, we're going up to the North Sea. We're going to be staying in Hunstanton, which is Norfolk area, to maybe 2 hours drive outside of London. Well, he called. He did call. He made 3 phone calls. And where we were staying, at Sheila Twitty Smith's, where you have stayed with us, Tony, on many occasions, she didn't want to disturb us. Once they called, It was in the evening. She didn't want to disturb us because we were resting in our room. The second phone call he made, we were having breakfast, and she didn't want to disturb us.
One of the most important cases of our life.
And she didn't want to
disturb a real-life werewolf, and she didn't want to disturb us.
And the third phone
and the police
call...
at that calling for you.
Right.
She said, I don't want to disturb you.
And the third phone call I overheard and went to take the call. And we went down there. Now, that day, they introduced us to Bill and Nina Ramsey. Beautiful couple. She works for immigration, and he was respected man. They had grown children in college, and they had a family dog. Now, that family dog...
The dog's name wasn't Wolf by chance,
No,
was
it was Shadow.
Oh, Shadow. Okay.
Shadow.
You know, I have to tell you, though, Terry Fisher was a sergeant on the English Police Department. He was one of the ones that was attacked by Bill Ramsey. Now, this guy stands about 6'3", weighs about 250. Good shape. When I went to his house and I said, I would like you to come over to the pub with us when we interview Bill Ramsey. And he said, there's no way that I would go near that man. He said, I don't care if there's 100 police around, I would not go near him. I came as close, he said, to dying as I ever did in any of my experiences in the police department. He would not go near him. I interviewed 2 other police officers. They would not go near Bill Ramsey. And I'm thinking, this guy must be pretty bad. And here we are, we're going to go interview him, just Lorraine and I, in this pub. And I picked out the pub because I wanted it to be like a public place. Like I didn't want to meet him in some lonely room someplace.
No.
And another thing was, later on when he came to America, and he was exorcised by Bishop Robert McKenna of the traditional Catholic Church, Our Lady of the Rosary in Monroe, one of the holiest and pious men that you ever would meet. And he was the only man that we could think of that could really bring peace to Bill Ramsey, free him of this wolf spirit. So we're there, you know, and I'm talking with Bill in Boston. It's a television show. And they gave us adjoining rooms. And Lorraine said, we should leave the door open for Bill so he can walk in and out. I said, Lorraine, this guy went right through the bars of a jail cell, pushed his head, shoulder, and arm through a 12-inch space. I am not leaving that door open. I said,
even after he was exercised.
Here's 12 cops can't hold this guy down.
And you want to leave the door open for him?
To leave a door open for him? I said, no way.
But I want to tell you, Tony, you've met Bill Ramsey.
Yes.
And he's a gentle, beautiful man.
When he's Bill Ramsey.
When he is Bill Ramsey. But during the exorcism of Bill, on that July day in 1989 in that church, anybody that's listening to this program right now that would find it difficult to believe that such things as a werewolf exist, they should have been in that church that day.
I think what we ought to do is show that.
I was going to say, I know you brought a film tonight to show the interview of Bill Ramsey. What I'd like to do, I'd like to show it if we could, and maybe talk over the film before it starts maybe, and just fill us in real quick what it's about.
Yeah, what we're doing here is now, Bill Ramsey's in our home. Kevin Hogan, who was with a local television station, was there with us. We were talking with him. And he's asking Bill about how all of this came about. Bill Ramsey tells him when he was a boy, an experience that he had one summer afternoon. It was a hot day. He was in the backyard of his home. His father was a soldier. I think they call him a master.
Major.
Major at arms? Sergeant Major?
Sergeant Major.
Tough guy, tough guy. And so young Bill went out to the backyard, and he said suddenly it became very icy cold. And there was this here stench of something dead. At that point, he didn't remember anything, but his mother and father, looking out the window, said that this boy, this little thin kid, picked up not barbed wire, but chicken wire that had been attached to posts and cemented, and ripped them out with his hands and tore the wire with his teeth. Now that's impossible to do, but that was the first official report of him changing.
Okay, well, anytime that film is ready to queue up, I think we should get it going.
Queue up, you hit it right.
I believe it's about...
Queue up.
Queue up. That's what they say in England, Tony. Queue up.
I think we'll queue up that film anytime Rob can get that film going.
Now come to believe possession started was when I was 9 years old. Suddenly the temperature just dropped completely, like midwinter, freezing cold. And there was a terrible stink come in the air, like a sewer had backed up or something. Then I just literally flew off the handle as though I was mad at somebody. Just went into total rage, and I mean a rage.
Up until 2 years ago, Londoner Bill Ramsey didn't know why he would attack people, just like the Wolfman in the movies.
Even a man who is pure in heart and says his prayers by night may become a wolf when the wolfbane blooms and the autumn moon is bright.
I had a very big bad attack and nearly killed a police officer at Southend Police Station. That was in 1987, July 1987.
Ramsey was put in an institution.
They ran all their tests, the brain scans and all this kind of stuff, but all the brain scan can really tell you is not what's wrong with you, it's really what isn't.
Ramsey said it got to a point where he can actually sense a change coming on. So he would drive himself to the police station and the bobbies would lock him up. In here, he says, is where others would be safe.
But the English tabloids found Ramsey and hounded him to reveal his real-life folklore of a man-wolf.
He exhibited superhuman strength. That was an indication to me that maybe that was of a demonic nature.
Thousands of miles away in Monroe, Connecticut, ghost hunters Lorraine and Ed Warren heard about the Ramsey case.
The typical werewolf, all of a sudden, the fangs come out, the hair comes out, the full moon. I said, that's not the way it is. This is a possession by the wolf spirit.
Intrigued, the Warrens went to London and met Ramsey. And after studying his case, they concluded the only way to rid Bill of his curse was through the religious rite of exorcism. It was performed in Monroe with the help of Bishop Robert McKenna.
Otherwise, we sat him in the front pew and in front of the altar and in an armchair and strapped him in it.
I had absolutely no faith in it whatsoever. I thought it was bunkum, stuff for the movies. I remember him approaching me and making the sign of the cross, and I started to shake.
He would crush his hand, he would hold his hand like his little claws, you know, trying to resist the exorcism.
And then he put his stole he was wearing around his neck, and he wrapped it around my head, and I don't really remember too much.
And then it was over.
Maybe it was ordained to be me, to make people aware that this demonic possession thing does happen.
So Ed, what is Bill Ramsey doing right now?
Bill Ramsey, of course, is back to his normal self.
So he's back to his normal self.
Yes, Tony, he is back to his normal self. Thank God for men like Bishop Robert McKenna. As I said earlier, is one of the most pious and holy men that I've ever come across. He is a traditional bishop of Our Lady of the Rosary Chapel in Monroe, Connecticut. And if you've seen these nuns there, and you see these priests that are there, these go back many, many years. Very, very knowledgeable, very experienced in this area of work. And I've seen Bishop McKenna help many people. In fact, I have to say that most of the exorcisms today in the United States occur right in that church, Our Lady of the Rosary Chapel.
Well, he's with the traditional church, correct?
Yes,
Traditional
he's
church,
a
right.
traditional
The old ways of the Catholic religion. And if it were not for Lorraine and for Bishop McKenna, Bill Ramsey might be in a mental institution today. He might be dead. He might have killed somebody. That was one of his worst fears, that he would kill somebody or hurt somebody so bad, and he would know nothing about it at all. And lycanthropy is a type of a disease, but in this case, it was an actual possession. Now, when we talk about the wolf spirit, this means that he would react as a wolf would react. He had the strength of 50 men. I mean, this guy did feats that nobody could ever imagine. And you know, every legend has fact behind it someplace. Your vampires, your ghosts, your werewolves. So Bill Ramsey is the only case that I know of that was a true case of a werewolf.
Mm-hmm. So lycanthropy then is the possession by the wolf spirit?
By the wolf spirit. The wolf spirit in this case would be a demonic spirit. The Indians believed that it was an actual wolf spirit, an animal wolf. There are weird tigers. There are weird hippopotamuses. Father Michael Alembi of Nigeria, Africa, worked with Lorraine and I years ago. And he told us about his village in Nigeria, Cross River, and about how the hippopotamus, the crocodiles, would be possessed by what they call the water society, which were men that would go into a catatonic state. And they would leave that physical body with the astral body, and they would possess the body of a crocodile, or a hippo, or a tiger. And then they would do their foul deeds. But this, of course, was different than what Bill Ramsey had occurred to him. He was possessed by a demonic spirit, which was called the wolf spirit.
And that's why the exorcism by a Catholic priest
was successful, Tony.
Successful.
And about the most pious Catholic bishop that I could ever come across.
Lorraine, anything you'd like to add or summarize as far as the Ramsey case? I know this was your baby.
Oh, it was, Tony. You have no idea how proud I am of this case. I mean, and then to have it have a positive end, that hot July day in that church in Monroe was the culmination of everything.
And we knew that there was only one person that could help Bill Ramsey.
And you know what happened, Tony? I had tried very hard to find funding. See, I wanted nothing to do with any money connected with this. And so I needed to find funding in order to bring Bill Ramsey to this country to be exorcised. Otherwise, Ed and I would have had to live over in England for a period of time, and time just wasn't on our side to do that.
I think it's important to acknowledge the British police
why
departments.
we got these?
I understand they gave you an actual helmet. This is an actual helmet from the Essex Police.
Yes.
And that's an actual woman's helmet. This, I'm holding this, ladies and gentlemen, this is not a fake. It's not one of those souvenirs.
Oh,
it even has numbers in it.
Yes.
And I also understand that they gave you a plaque. And they also gave Ed and Lorraine an actual police badge as Essex Police. And I really like to congratulate, for any British citizens out there listening, that the British police departments and the British people in general are very congenial, and they were more than forthcoming in trying to help you out.
They helped
in this
us.
case.
Thankful.
You have no idea how thankful they were, Tony, and how much they went out of their way, unlike a lot of people that might in this country, how they went out of their way to be of help to us and document. Now, I'm talking about police officials, I'm speaking of bobbies, I'm speaking of everyone that we dealt with in order to document this case. But after all the documentation that we had, and it all on video as well as records, when I asked Bishop McKenna, Bishop, I said, would you like to borrow the tape, and would you like to borrow all of the material so that you can see the documentation? He said to me, no, because then I might be frightened. He said, I would rather do it and help that man.
I don't know if we can get a shot of this. Maybe we can go to the camera one and see if we can get it. It might be a little glary, but if we can get a picture there.
Oh, there.
It says the aftermath. And on this other page here where my fingers are, it's showing Bishop McKenna and Bill Ramsey. I guess this was after the exorcism?
Right after the exorcism,
How long did this exorcism take?
40 minutes.
Not long, only 40
minutes, Tony.
One time.
Right.
Yes.
And it worked.
And again, I attribute that to Bishop McKenna.
Yes.
Okay, and this is the book Werewolf. That could be purchased still to this day, correct?
Yes, it can.
This is by Ed and Lorraine Warren, of course, with Bill Ramsey and Robert David Chase. And I believe this is also in hardcover.
Yes,
I'm sorry,
in
paperback.
softcover. Yes,
it's
it is,
in hardcover
Tony.
Here, of course. How could they get this book? Just go to a bookstore?
Yes, they can order it through places. They can order it through places
here's the
like...
softcover. So if you want to get the detailed version of this story, and it is quite a fascinating story at that, you could go to any library, perhaps, or any bookstore to get a copy of this.
Walden Books, Barnes and Noble.
And read up on the werewolf. So, Ed, do you think that this is a common occurrence?
Oh, I don't think it's a common occurrence, no, because, you know, this is the only case we ever came across.
But it's real, though.
It's real.
Yes.
This is the real thing.
How about vampires, too? Vampires are part of this whole
Well,
mystique.
a vampire, of course, your movie stereotype vampire, it doesn't really happen like that. But there are such things as vampires, and we'll be talking on that in about 3 weeks, we'll be going over the whole vampire scene. A man by the name of Calbani, vampire, was buried in their grave in Old Greenwich Farms Cemetery.
Was there something
Another man,
wasn't there something up in Woodstock, Vermont?
Woodstock,
Yes,
Vermont.
yes.
Man by the name of Curtis, who was claimed to be a vampire by 7 medical doctors, including the director of the medical school in Woodstock, Vermont. So we'll be talking about vampires.
People could
also
even get books on that subject, correct?
Oh, yeah.
Like what was that book you told me about that had that vampire in it? Was it Tales of New England or something like that?
Oh, Mysterious New England, was it?
Was that in there? Was that?
Yeah.
Yes.
So anybody can go to the library
Yes.
and look up these cases. They're actual cases.
Oh, yes.
Fascinating cases at that. They're not just ghost stories either.
Oh, no.
So I'd like to just finish the program, if I could, with our traditional quest that we have to help people, in fact. How would people contact you?
In fact, Tony, if anybody out there looking at us right now feels that their house is haunted,
Yeah.
they can call on us, and we'll be glad to go out there, talk with them. Or if they've had some interesting experiences they'd like to come on the program here and talk with us about.
Okay, so how would they go about getting on the program? I guess they would contact you
Yes,
at
they
P.O.
contact
Box,
us, but they don't have to go on the program. They can
Of
remain
course.
anonymous.
at P.O.
That
Box
would be-
41,
Monroe,
it's
Connecticut.
local,
Yes.
06468. And you know, we really appreciate these programs because we've been getting a lot of feedback.
Yes.
And the cable company has been gracious enough, of course, to have this time with us. So next week I know is going to have a very good program also. It's a surprise. So until next time, I am Police Officer Tony Spare from the British Police Department. And along with Ed Warren and Lorraine Warren, I'd like to thank you all tonight for tuning in.
Constables.
They call them constables, that's correct. I stand corrected. Good night.
Good night.